the Natchitoches-NSU Folk Festival. It's July 21st, 2018, and the title of this session is Songwriting Using Traditions with Smithfield Fair. And we're going to let the group go ahead and define themselves, tell you who they are and what they do, and they're going to be talking about traditions, folk traditions and songwriting and so forth. And I'm Sheila Richmond. We're going to keep this really informal, if that's okay with you guys.
Absolutely.
And if there are any questions, just raise your hand and we'll get to them. Don't be offended. If you ask a question, I'll probably repeat it just to make sure that we get it on the tape, okay? All right, introduce yourselves.
Well, hello, we're Smithfield Fair. We're glad to be back at Folk Life. It's always a pleasure to be here. We feel very much a part of the cultural community in Louisiana for a number of reasons. One, we're Louisiana natives. We grew up playing in the state, and although we've gone over the course of years many other places, we always come home, and that's always good to be here. And the other thing is that we believe very fervently in the efforts to promote and to recognize Louisiana cultures and traditions. Today we're going to talk about using tradition itself in songwriting. So people think about songwriting and they think about, well, new things. But songwriting's been going on since time immemorial, and so we'll hit it off, and we're going to do this kind of as a round robin so we can kind of get our feet on the floor. CDs and stuff in the box right there for you, if you'll just take one. Help yourself. There's a CD and a info sheet there.
We don't charge for the CDs. We do charge for the info
sheets.
So.
$1,000 a piece. All right, Bobby.
Well, we charge.
Oh, this is.
Go ahead.
This is my brother Bob, and this is my wife Jan, and I'm
This is
Dudley.
my brother Dudley.
We've been together This is our 47th year, and we've released in 2017 our 31st album. You have 3 of our albums here in this pack, and we'll tell you a little bit about some of the songs that are on there, and then
He still calls them albums.
Yes, you got it.
CDs.
I also still remember jukeboxes too. So, all right, now.
Yeah. Well, the 2 words we need to consider briefly to understand when we're talking about tradition and using traditional names is, one is anonymous, and Dudley so nicely spelled it here for me, but I don't need to go through the spelling of that. It's usually of a person that's really not identified by name or unknown, and you see a lot of things attributed to that, like the unknown author of, say, Beowulf, are one of those, and the synonyms for that are like unnamed, unknown, nameless, unidentified, have no outstanding individual, unusual features, or remarkable, or impersonal. And so we have a lot that we owe to traditional, whether it's for us music or for art, in unknown circles of the artists on there.
The other word of the day is tradition, defined as, quote, the transmission of customs or beliefs from generation to generation, or the fact of being passed on in this way, with synonyms: historical convention, unwritten law, mores.
Well, first off, we need to understand that what is considered a traditional song, and these are songs that are sung for generations and fully accepted into whatever culture from which they came, or acknowledged by people outside that culture as indicative of that culture. This simply means that the songwriter's name, listed as anonymous, is just not known. In the old days, there were no copyright laws, any ways to enforce this. So people would hear a good melody and they'd take it with them. They'd go around. The minstrels would travel around from place to place, and they'd say, oh, that's a good melody. And they were pretty quick on their feet. They'd just invent new words for it, for whatever the topics of the day were. So that's the way traditional songs started, from these anonymous sources. When that happens, someone who writes a great melody that people can hum or whistle knows that it will live on if they hear people singing it, but that's all the credit they used to get.
Yeah. And so let's be clear too that all traditions start at some specific time. That means that at a certain time they began, and then they were repeated over and over again and passed down. And so your traditions became in stone, so to speak, and all traditions start with a beginning like that, all traditions.
This means that in order to keep the traditions going, you have to keep doing them and make them comfortable for new audiences from generation to generation. Sometimes you modify it or improve it, sometimes even, to ensure this, but they've also been started by someone that can end somewhere else or end completely if nobody finds them valuable. They just completely fade out, die out, sometimes forever.
Over the years, we've seen this happen in a number of cultures where things were relegated to the mists of time. They were not considered relevant or of particular interest to that culture, that time, so they were forgotten. Sometimes they can be brought back again later on to somebody that's historically interested in them. But to keep them relevant, they have to be used and passed on.
Yeah, so therefore, it's important for cultural traditions, you want to know what basis they began, why they began. And why is one of those words that we use, who, what, when, where, why. Why is what we need to know, why they were started and why they're applicable to a certain time or a current time. And so such case with us for songwriting, music styles change as artistic fashions change, and the only way to keep traditions and even entire musical styles going is to use them and find ways to make them relevant. Sometimes it means broadening out a lyrical theme or the style in which they are presented.
So for the last 45 years or so, what Smithfield Fair, what we've tried to do, is take song styles and make them relevant to ourselves, which also makes them relevant to contemporary listening audiences. We even sometimes have reshaped some song styles from our own catalog to make them appealing to current audiences. And we have submerged ourselves in the cultures for which we are interested in singing, whether it's Louisiana culture or Southern culture, church culture, and for a while, our Scottish culture, we did a lot of material there by submerging ourselves and learning as much as we could about it and living it. And that way it becomes your own.
Now, the first song we're going to do as an example of this is, a lot of times you do see anonymous on that, and we sort of concentrated on that to some degree here, but this song, we actually know the source of it. It was written by a gentleman by the name of Stephen Foster in the late 1850s, or late 1800s. It was published. It was not really particularly popular at the time. He died almost in an unknown. But the songs lived on. He's the fellow that wrote Camptown Races and a number of things like that. This song, every few years, comes back out. It's a plea for those who are better off to help those who are less well off, and to make sure that everybody has enough. It's a song with a great timeless message, and in the last 5 or 6 years, this has become a song that has been played relentlessly in everything from Scottish and Irish culture to British folk song history, but it is uniquely American and a beautiful song. And so we'll do this one for you, and pretty much the way it was written. It's such a good song and not that old, so we don't have to change much.
Let us pause in life's pleasures and count its many tears as we all suffer sorrow with the poor. There's a song that will linger forever in our ears.
Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more.
While we seek mirth and beauty and
'Tis the song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered all around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis a sigh that is wafted across the troubled wave. 'Tis a wail that is heard upon the shore. 'Tis a dirge that is murmured around the lowly grave. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. Oh, hard times come again no more.
So one of Jan's songs we'll do next is God Never Sleeps. And it's really a new song, but it's written kind of in the old style, gospel style. And it has a chorus and a refrain, and it seeks to uplift, seeks to give comfort. It's like most of the spiritual songs like that we remember. And so it figures in the style of the gospel song.
It's 4 in the morning, and I have been thinking about what you told me. I still hear your voice, just a few sad words. Oh, I wish I were dreaming these
falters nor fails, in war or in peace, in joy or in sorrow, today or tomorrow. I remember
that God never stays. Oh, I remember that God never
What song we do?
Our next piece actually was written by Bob.
Oh, that one.
That one,
The love song.
the love song. This is
Traditional love song.
it's called To Louisiana, and it picks up the themes of food and love, which Louisiana is
Or
very,
is that
very
love-
well known for. Love and food.
Love and
Yeah,
food,
love and
or
food
love
song.
of food.
And it captures also the rhythm and the melody of the Southern Louisiana Cajun music and such recent songs as Hank Williams' Jambalaya. We sort of submerged ourselves in the Louisiana culture.
Or is that submerge or immerse?
But I don't think you've ever come back from
Depends on
the
whether you're
food.
gasping for air at the end of it.
That's right, gasping for air. Or gasping for more food.
From Kentucky across the Mississippi line, back to Louisiana, gonna have a good time. Coming back home to Louisiana.
Roast beef, crawfish, bass by the dozen, rabbit, turkey, daddy, and sticking in the oven. Fixing up fights, beef, bacon, and ham, hot butter biscuits, syrup.
Yes, man. From Kentucky across the Mississippi line, back to Louisiana, gonna have a good time. Coming back home to Louisiana.
Sweet corn gives a little sugar to me. Sure tastes better than the honey from the bee. Get a second helping, go to sleep for sure. Never get enough of my
Only cure. From Kentucky across the Mississippi line, back to Louisiana, gonna have a good time. Coming back home to Louisiana. Coming back home to Louisiana. Hello, Gina.
Gina, yeah!
Funny that you should walk in right after we do to Louisiana.
Yeah. Wonderful to see you.
Fiddler extraordinaire, Gina Forsythe.
Traditions.
There's a box there, you get stuff out of the box. That's the handouts for the workshop there. Okay.
And the free CDs.
This is a silly song. This song came out of old blues traditions, and we were at the time that it was written playing with a lot of blues traditions and a lot of the things that we thought were interesting at the time, but we didn't want them to sound the same. So what we did was we stretched it a little bit. The recording of it became sort of a second line piece. We've now gotten it back to somewhere between jug band and blues.
And we call this a love memoriam.
This is a special kind of love. It's called fish lips. I'll let Bob start this.
Yeah, let's see if I can do this.
Peanut grinder. I'm taking my chances, taking my time. He's broken her promises, so I'm drawing the line. She thinks I'm leaving her, she may be right. One thing's for certain, that girl can bite. Oh, my sweet catfish lips, they put in my head. Without my money, that girl will pay. Yeah, and so it goes, and so it goes. She's such a strange one, she plays little games. She has many lovers, but somehow she forgets her name. She's so damn funky, she makes me scream. And when she kisses, it's like a jelly dream. Oh, my sweet catfish lips, it's pulling my leg. Without my money, that girl was paid. Oh, my sweet catfish lips, it's pulling my leg. Without my money, that girl was paid. Oh, I don't know what to do about that girl. She just comes and goes and goes and goes. Fish lips gone home. Fish lips gone home. Fish lips gone home. Fish lips gone home. She's a slimy one. Fish lips gone home. Fish lips gone home. Gone home.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you can't play that with a straight face. Speaking of silly songs, we won't go to the silly song here. But Sweet Sugar Cane is kind of more of a narrative of what you see in the sugarcane industry and kind of the effect it has on people. So it's really nice, rhythmic sense of change. It's got a little Cajun sensitivity to it that you hear in the Cajun music. But it's one that we've used and now has kind of been adopted by the Sugarcane Association. So it's nice to hear it on the commercials every now and then. So, Dudley wrote this one.
Shields me from relentless heat, and after you shower muscle relief. But then the temperatures increase, the men are working in the fields, and trucks are loaded with an amazing tree. Sugarcane, sweet sugarcane, sweetness of our southern dreams. Sweet sugarcane, fireflies in the jasmine city. And all of you'd expected change, colors cooler, but here remains the feeling of my slowest summer days. The last petals of blossoms linger, dragonflies sail above the river, but in the fertile fields they'll hardly sugarcane, sweet sugarcane, sweetness sweetness of our southern dream. Sugarcane, sweet sugarcane, fireflies in the jasmine city breeze. Down on the grassy bank, sip by lemonade. Summer passes for the rest of the world, but here it's some shade. Barefoot in the cooling creek, minnows darting round our feet, but now it's time to put attention to the fields of sugarcane, sweet sugarcane, the sweetness of our southern dream. Sugarcane, sweet sugarcane, fireflies in the jasmine city breeze. Sugarcane, sweet sugarcane. Sugarcane, sweet sugarcane.
And finally, losing super glue off the thing. You know, super glue has a wonderful quality about it. It's just about coming off my fingernail.
That's just so traditional.
We're
Yeah, it is.
We're again glad to be here. We're going to do one more song that I think really encapsulates for us the ongoing tradition of the song. This song was written in the late 1800s by a guy named Robert Tannahill. At least the song lyric was written by Robert Tannahill. The melody is a traditional Scottish song. A few years ago, an Irishman named Francis McPeak, who was a performer, copyrighted the song, and someone took issue with him copyrighting the song. And he went to court, and basically the determination is what he was copyrighting was his arrangement of the song, which was slightly different than the way he had learned it in his travels in Scotland. But the lyrics were definitely from Robert Tannahill's work. And so we have this song that every few years sort of rears its head again and becomes very, very popular. Pete Seeger with the Weavers back in the 50s popularized this song, and Burl Ives in the early 60s, same thing. But it was the Byrds in the mid 60s that came along and did this song and made it a pop hit.
Yeah.
And all they did was add jangly guitars to it. They didn't change the lyrics, and they didn't change the real approach to it, other than to make it contemporary. In doing so, they brought hordes of people the attention to this song again, all over again. And it had been considered a folk song for them. Now it was considered a popular song again. Nearly 200 years, 100 and something years after it first made its appearance. So although to some degree it was considered an anonymous tune for a long time, the tune still is, the lyrics are attributed to Robert Tannahill. It's still one of those songs that's just been handed down from generation to generation. We find it's one of the songs in the Scottish repertoire that is the most consistent in it's being joined in by the audience. When we sing this song, everybody knows Wild Mountain Time, and so we do that. So we thought we would conclude with a traditional song. We started with more or less traditional Hard Times Come No More. We'll end with this song. I would like to remind you that if you didn't get your packets, that we have a free packet for you. There's an added bonus on this. The young lady sitting in the back of the room is one of Louisiana's foremost Cajun fiddlers. She should say that's not, you're pushing it, but I'm not.
It's true, it's true.
Few people are known outside the United States and outside of Louisiana the way Gina is known, for what Gina has done with Cajun fiddling, and Michael Doucet. Those two are names that people just know. So Gina is on Winds of Time that's in here, and so you get to hear, again, the mix of artists bringing something to material that wasn't there before, and Gina did a beautiful job lifting these songs into a different place.
Yeah, and When Some Time had a traditional sound to it, but it was not. It's all
All original.
Yeah.
It's all original material, but it was done in very traditional styles, and so we'll end with a traditional song. And you're welcome to sing along with us on this.
Summertime is coming, and the trees are sweetly blooming, and the wild mountain thyme blows around the purple sea, and we'll all go together to a wild mountain thyme, all around the purple river. We'll go, let's see. If my trouble will not go, I will surely find another to a wild mountain thyme, all around and we'll all go together to a wild mountain thyme, all around the purple river. We go, let's build my hollow tower by yon clear crystal fountain, and in it I will hide all the flowers and we'll all go together to a wild mountain thyme, all around the purple river. We'll go, let's and we'll all go together to a wild mountain thyme, all around the purple river. We'll go, I see, go.
Thank you very much.
Wow, hasn't this been a treat? When's the last time you heard harmony?
It was all piped in.
Oh, yeah.
We lip sync the
We lip
harmony.
sync. This is a Milli Vanilli thing.
Questions from anybody?
Yes.
How did you get your name?
Actually, it was drawn out of the hat, if you really want to know the truth. Not the one I'm wearing, but close. Jan said we were known as Charmer for a lot of years, and we felt that we'd just gotten to the point where Charmer had sort of run its course, and we also got annoyed that people kept calling us the Charmers or Charmers
Or Charmin.
just all sorts of different things. So we decided, we're beginning to move in a Celtic direction. Let's go with something. And Jan said one night out of nowhere, "How about Smithfield Fair?" Well, we all said, "Oh yeah, that's pretty good. Let's go with that." So underwent the big thing of changing the name. Smithfield Fair turned out to have two significance for us. The English side of our family came over here on a land grant to found a city in Isle of Wight County, Virginia, called Smithfield. Still there today, the man's house.
Where the
Arthur
hams
Smith.
come from, and my mother says that explains it.
And the other was that in our Scottish part of the heritage, William Wallace, the guardian of Scotland, was executed at Smithfield Kirk. And they had a fair that day to celebrate. They thought he was going to be a monster. He was a huge man. He was ferocious. He was probably of Welsh descent and had just basically overtaken the land with legends. And the English people were absolutely terrified when they brought him into town that he'd get loose. So they had when they realized that he couldn't get loose, they had a fair that day. And so it's a point in Scottish tradition and in Scottish independence that we thought that works real well. So that's where the name came from. Yes.
The first song you sang, Hard Time, is that a traditional Scottish song?
No, it's not. It's a
No,
American
it's
song. It's written by Stephen Foster, the guy that wrote "Old Folks at Home" and "Camptown Races Sing This Song, Doo Dah Doo Dah," and a lot of other things. He was a very unsuccessful songwriter during his lifetime. He actually loved the South. Loved the South. The only time he ever came down here was on a riverboat cruise that his brother scraped together the money to give Foster and his wife for their wedding and of their wedding honeymoon. And so they came down slightly into the Mississippi area down here, and they went right back up. But he was enamored with the South, and so a lot of his songs have what to him was a Southern sound. And today he's almost been adopted as a Southern songwriter, though that was his only foray here. Died in Philadelphia, fell over, struck his head on a bedside table, and about 3 days later he died from it.
We have a lot of happy stories.
Yeah,
That's why it's Scottish history. Somebody has to die at the end, and or everybody has to die at the
But
end.
I do
Actually,
think that song is a perfect example of traditions moving forward. When you cannot tell how old a song is, or it sounds like its roots are deep, its roots probably are deep. And they probably are. I know that, for example, Wild Mountain Time, I use a lot of fourths and fifths in the chord structures to imitate the bagpipe. I use a lot of long bass notes to imitate the drum of the bagpipe. So that I've turned the accordion really into, I call it my acoustic synthesizer. Much like a synthesizer gets different sounds of different instruments, I use it for that. And that also brings in some of the traditional pieces that we can't do as a trio. Can't play, a flute and sing at the same time, so I'll imitate it on the accordion. And in that way, it also brings it forward.
and we don't have to pay extra for another musician.
There you go. That's we don't-
Actually, ironically, I use the bagpipes a lot of times to simulate the accordion sound. Turnabout is fair play.
And he can sing and play at the same time on that. One of the other songs we talk about, traditional songs that new songs that and we did it last night because it's one that was kind of in our Celtic repertoire. Has been touted as, and we hear lots of people doing it as, this is a traditional Scottish song. And you're standing by our stage side listening to the long ships, the one we did about the Viking long ships. And it's kind of hilarious because it's not, it's ours. And one guy said, yeah, it's kind of unknown artist, traditional. And I'm going, excuse me, we know the artist there.
Not this time.
It's a real compliment, though, to have
Yeah.
a fairly new
Huge
work.
compliment.
We have several of those that are, went into a pub one night and there was a guy doing The Pretender Will Come No More, which is definitely ours, never existed before about 1999. But there they were doing it. They had been doing it, this was in the early part of this decade, or last decade. They said, oh, we've been doing it for several years. They heard a reenactment group in Florida singing it as they left the battlefield after a reenactment, the Scottish unit, and they thought, that's wonderful. So they went up to the band and they said, the reenactors said, where'd you get that song? They said, well, we learned it. It's an old traditional song. We learned it from a band called Smithfield Fair. You can find their albums online. And so they did. They got the album and they learned The Pretender and threw the CD away. You know, it's a traditional song. So there's no bigger compliment than to have your songs enter into the traditional.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Whose idea was it to start up, and what was it like to start up making music together?
Well, we've all three of us came out of choral traditions. We sang at church, we sang at schools, we were musicians. Our father was a musician, our mother was a radio singer. So we started singing together as kids. But this band started in 1973 in Pensacola. I was there stationed in the service, and I just, there were some great players. I wanted to get a band together to do original material eventually. And we started, and it was very exciting at the time. Within 6 months, we had a recording contract, went up to Nashville to record. We've kind of been doing it ever since. And we do it, now that we're older, we still do it because we love it most of the time.
And we're still on speaking terms.
Yeah, we're in his kitchen, practicing learning new songs.
Yeah, and for us starting out, it's kind of like, in a sense, this is tradition among a lot of bandmembers. What do you start with? You start with other people's tunes. And tunes that we had heard or tunes that were popular. And of course, growing up, everybody wanted to be in a band. And so the popular music on the radio, so what you do, you sit there picking out things, because you didn't know how to do the instrument, you pick out things on the radio. And you're listening, and of course they would recycle the music over and over, so you're bound to hear the hits over and over on there. And so you started playing like that, and all of us knew someone who was kind of a virtuoso in maybe their own minds, but usually they were better than you at the guitar. And so you get together around and play, and those are big things that came out. And of course, coming out of the folk movement had a lot of sing-alongs. People gathered around and sang, and in many cultures, that's what you'll find is the beginning of groups, if you will, or certain singers is they'd sit around as families and as friends, and that was part of the entertainment, and keeping tradition and telling about the history of where you were by singing about it. So that's
Well, and the big line back then in folk circles was, you get to these big group sings and you're sitting there singing and you're sitting next to somebody and you say, hey babe, we harmonize very well together. And pretty soon you've got another group that spins off from it. And that's kind of the way it was. And if
I
you
just
look at
usually got my face slapped.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
I only read about these things. So, basically music begets music. And if you get in these groups and you learn to play with people and you go to the high school band, you're in the high school band or the church band or whatever, and you learn to play, you're going to meet other people that learn to play, that love to play, and you're going to find people that will work with you and exchange ideas, and you learn things from each other, and pretty soon, you move along. That's never going to change.
Anyone else?
Well, stay tuned for John. John is an absolutely amazing guitar player.
Phenomenal. So
I am playing open too. Open D Vestibule. I got it from Richie Havens.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Okay. I think we're out of time now, so
Yeah,
we
okay.
want to thank you.
If you came in late, if you're here to see John, but you came in time, there are CDs. There's a CD pack in there. You're welcome to take one and take it with you with our compliments.
and even John can take one.
John.
Thank you so much.